Hello, Ozzy.
I know. How's things? Oh, geez, that's a mess, isn't it?
How are you?
Not bad. Yourself?
Pretty good, thank you. Uh,
Currently enjoying the weather vortex as it passes over.
is it cold?
Is it
What?
cold? About
Yeah,
-18, I think. So.
yeah. Yeah, like I can't. I mean, honestly, without doing anything specific outside, I cannot stand being outside more than 25 minutes because after that, it starts to really getting. Uh,
Yep, that's about it. We invested in some of those heating mats for melting snow at the beginning of winter, and they've been fantastic.
so where did you put those mats?
On the steps and on the front path leading down to the sidewalk.
Oh, and is it enough?
Yes, more than enough.
Wow,
Is it
okay.
expensive? Quite possibly, but
Oh, yeah.
on the other
Wow.
hand, I'm not having to shovel the snow, so I'm winning.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Huh. Yeah, I heard of those.
We've got a small bunch of mats. We've got ones that do. We got 4 steps down from the porch to the path, and each of the steps has its own mat. And then
Mhm.
there are 2 long mats that do most of the path out to the sidewalk. We didn't put down the last one because we know that the sidewalk plows have a habit of accidentally erasing things within a foot of the sidewalk. So
Yeah, no, I don't know.
So there's a little bit of snow and ice at the beginning, but then after that, it's free all the way up. And of course, every time there's a little bit of snow drizzle, we just click the button to turn them back on again, and leave them running for a few hours. And once they look clean, just turn them off again.
So they're not automated. I mean, there's not a kind of
No,
start or
not
something.
out the box. They're automated in the sense you can buy a manual button to press, with a radio that will
Yeah.
turn it on and off. You can fully automate it with a snow sensor, but then you need an electrician to install the snow sensor because it's hardwired, and that's $500, give or take, just for the sensor before you pay for the electrician. So you're in a lot of money at that
A
point.
snow sensor? I mean,
Yeah,
there is a snow sensor that does
yeah,
exist.
there is a snow sensor, and it's very particular about where it's placed. I was reading all of the documentation. It has to be like at a point where it won't get buried in snow. It has to be able to see the sky, so you can't put it up on your porch out the way.
Wow.
Um, it has to be able to detect basically when it's snowing, but not end up in a snowbank. Otherwise, it'll never turn off.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that. I mean, I understand that, optical sensor or humidity sensor, but snow sensor, yeah, that's another
It's
that's
got
another
a
game.
bunch of stuff, yeah, because it's trying to tell whether the temperature is in the right range for it to snow and whether there's actually precipitation falling on it. And then when the two conditions are met at the right time, then it'll enable the power and heat the mats up. And it's
Wow.
obviously got a delay, so it keeps them on for a while after it's snowed
Of
as
course.
well. But there's a lot of smartness in it. But
Mhm.
that's a journey for another day. I mean, the
Yeah,
other
yeah,
way
yeah.
to do it is stick a camera on the top of your building, run OpenCV, and point it at the front path and figure out if the path is black or not. If
But
the
that
mats
is
don't
probably
look
the most,
black, turn the
yeah,
mats on.
that is
If you
probably
can't, yeah,
I mean, the simplest solution.
yeah. I mean, it's simplest in the sense that it uses a large amount of computing power, but it's probably easier than putting a sensor in the right place
Well, not
outside.
anymore. I think what you're just saying is like, I mean, it's just figuring out the color of a given pattern in an image. I mean,
Mm.
that's not Gen AI intensive, that's kind
No,
of
no, no, exactly. It's simple
old.
stuff, but
Yeah, this is old generation AI.
yeah, but this is a world away from a sensor that probably only has discrete components in it.
Yeah, sure, but still, this one, if it costs you $500, then you
A
need to
valid point. I
be.
mean, I wonder if we could make a sensor that costs less than $500 that would do the job better and
Yeah,
not need to be wired by an electrician.
yeah, sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's interesting. Nice.
Oh, I am chasing a bug,
Yes.
possibly in Exporter at the moment, that I've found from my Java platform because I've just finished writing a GitHub workflow that tests my platform on macOS with Podman and Windows with a Windows container. It doesn't get very far, but it's good enough. And Ubuntu with Podman 4, which comes with it by default, and Podman 5, which is installed, and with Docker. So that hits most of the major platforms that stuff is going to be tested on. Let me rephrase that. That hits most of the major operating systems this is going to be tested on, and most of the major container runtimes. And I
So,
hit a snag. It doesn't work on Docker Ubuntu, the one that you'd really wanted to work on. And when I'm looking into it, it's coming down to that when exporter tries to create the output image via
stop,
image
stop, stop,
util.
stop. So,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. The CNB exporter. Sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Continue.
yeah, it's the export phase
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Okay,
during the
cool.
build. When the export phase runs, it tries to create the output image, and I'm running in daemon mode, so it's going into image util to create a new local image. In the
Yes.
working case, that comes back with an identifier that's an image ID as a long hex string. In the non-working case for Docker, it comes back with an image identifier of an empty string. And I don't mean like that it comes back with an empty string. I mean it comes back with the literal string, double quote, double quote.
Mm, mm.
So it's not actually empty, but it's like it's parsed an empty string incorrect anyway, and everything goes horribly wrong after that because then it tries to retrieve the top layer SHA from that output image, and it can't because it hadn't got an ID to talk to the daemon with, so everything goes wrong. But it
Yeah,
goes
yeah.
wrong with this misleading error about cannot run a top layer SHA could not get run image or something like that. It's a really messed up error, but I don't think it's anything to do with SHAs or the actual run image. I think it's just it failed to create the output image.
Yeah.
So
So,
I'm trying some stuff because it doesn't make sense why Docker can't create an image like that. So I'm digging. I've
yeah.
got a little test rig here now where I've got lifecycle in one code base window where I can edit it, rebuild it, and then in a shell it will use a Docker file to layer that lifecycle on top of my own build image, which has yet more debug in it. And then I've got the GitHub action set to use that special build image so that when it runs the build, it's running my build image with my hacked up version of lifecycle that has all the debug in it.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's working quite well because I've seen this error occur locally on Ubuntu and Docker, but it's very intermittent, like one in every 20, 30 builds, something like that. But in GitHub, for some unknown reason, it's every single build with Docker. So I just don't want to. I don't want to unbalance the GitHub runner too much by changing things because whatever state it's in that perfect state to trigger this intermittent bug every single time.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I can find this. I've got all the debug it's going through, and I'm just about to try some other tests and see what happens.
Mm.
It's not very Java specific, except for the fact that obviously I'm doing all this to try and get my Java platform up and running properly,
Yes.
which is going well. I was reading all of the test containers code. You know test containers?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Test containers is a blessing for Java developers. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this Java binding to actually control third-party dependencies such as MySQL databases or whatnot from a Java test. So yeah, yeah. I mean, I know test container as a user. I've
Mm-hmm.
been using it. Yeah, it's pretty good. And I know the Spring team is also they have in Spring Boot they have written some integration with test containers so that test container. Oh yeah, test container is going to load the definition of. Is it test container? Well, anyways, maybe but in Spring Boot development mode, you can have Spring that is going to find your Docker Compose.yaml and provision all the dependent containers for you. So
Yep.
that's pretty handy.
The
So yeah,
part that I like about test containers is they're using Docker Java
yeah,
and Docker Java, the API.
yeah, that's
What
true.
I don't like about test containers is they've obviously discovered that the Docker Java guy is quite slow to add bits and pieces to the API there, and so they've basically had to build a whole layer on top of Docker Java to handle certain things that would have been nice if they were in Docker Java to begin with, like authentication stuff. Docker Java provides you the capability with the way to say, I want to authenticate against this one host with this one set of credentials. But the problem is with Buildpacks, what happens if your builder is on one registry and you're outputting to another registry? So you need two sets of credentials active.
Oh,
Docker Java doesn't offer any way to do that out of the box. you have to basically start extending classes and providing things like auth delegating auth config providers so that when it calls to try and figure out which auth to use, you step in and say, use this one. But they don't provide any examples of that. But test containers have already figured all this out. And the more I read of the test containers code, the more I'm like, do you know, I've got all my layer that I'm writing to sit on top of Docker Java for my platform. But the more I'm looking at what they've done around that, I'm like, I really wish we could lift all that out and move it into a third project.
But are you saying that the layers that test containers has written on top of Docker Java is not handled in a new library, is directly inside the implementation of test container? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one of those, because in their minds, I guess nobody else is doing the sort of stuff they're doing. Because if they were, then Docker Java would have had more users. But I'm essentially doing pretty much the same stuff as them now because I need to run in multiple user environments against multiple types of runtime. I know I've got further on detecting runtimes than they have in a few ways, like detecting whether I'm running against Podman or detecting if I'm running against Docker. Because I've got logic in mind that I ended up having to actually invoke the Podman command line and parse the results that came back. Because I'm firing that off. I'm using format to make sure it returns me in JSON, so I know that the response should be good. But I'm firing off Podman commands to look up where the socket is and look up where the what string I should use for Docker host, essentially.
Yeah.
Because that varies. But it differs because, of course, on Linux, when you're running Podman, you're running it like you run Docker. But if you're on Mac, you're running a VM.
Mhm.
And when you do the path mapping to say that you need to mount, like if you want to do Docker in Docker with Podman, if you want to do Podman in Podman, I guess really, then you have to find the Podman socket's path inside the container and use that as the place inside the VM. And then that's the one that you map into the
Yeah, but
container.
that was something done by Docker for desktop. That's what they do, right? I mean, that's exactly.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there's similar stuff going on. With it's the problem is that when you're running a daemon-based build with Buildpacks, you need to mount the Docker socket into the container.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
this is what you were referring to. I mean, Docker and Docker, yeah.
Yeah. And so because of that, you need to know where it is. But the problem is when you're running with the whole Docker machine in a VM, the path to the Docker socket inside the VM is not always the same as your path to the Docker socket outside the VM. So
Yeah,
when you tell it that you're going to run a container and you want to mount this path into it, you are actually giving it a path from inside the VM to mount into the container. Just like that.
yeah. I know it doesn't feel natural from the host where you're sitting because this is
You're outside the world. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So this is why, the code that I've got for the platform now has to figure out what kind of environment it's running in and then ask Podman, well, hey, where is this socket in the VM so that I
Yeah.
can use that path when I do my volume mounts? And
I see.
that bit all works. It's
Yeah.
been quite a ride.
Yeah, and talking about tooling, I've heard recently, I don't know if you knew, but the Google container tools such as Canico and even Scaffold,
Mm.
the maintainers have officially said that they no longer maintain them. Basically, they are running, I mean, they are not evolving anymore. So apparently,
Yeah,
the push to give them to the CNCF.
feels
Uh,
like a bit like they're dumping it on the CNCF rather than, what I mean?
yeah, sure. Yeah, you can choose whatever verb you
Yeah,
want to describe this action. But yeah, that's I mean, to me that was kind of a shocker. I was surprised that tools in the container space were, I mean, such useful tools, were being deprecated somehow. So, or on
yeah. I
to,
suspect. I
to
suspect it's one of those ones that Google probably used it for something that they don't care about anymore, and so now they don't need to look after it anymore, so it's going away. It's always the risk with single vendor projects.
yeah, yeah, even open source. Yeah, I know.
Mm. Now, I
Yeah,
remember back when we prototyped the extension support, we looked at using Builder as well as Canico. This was a big thing between, I think it was Charles, who's one of my colleagues here at Red Hat. He was looking at Builder along with Natalie. And it did work. It could be made to work. So if we really had to, we could move off of Canico and move over to Builder. The
Hmm.
challenge with Builder was it required you to be a lot more explicit about the permissions that you were granting to the process when it was running those Docker files. Whereas Canico really took the slightly more cowboy attitude of we'll try it and see what happens,
Mm.
which is why you generally have to run these things with SE Linux disabled or at least with a broad permission brush to let it run. Whereas Builder correctly asks for all the permissions it's going to use up front, which scares most admins and they never want to allow it to run ever again. So
Yeah.
we're going to have to
Mm.
decide which way to go. If we want to get off of Canico because we decide that Canico's no longer viable for Buildpacks, then I think Builder's probably the only other option left to shift to.
Yeah. And Builder is maintained by,
Red Hat.
yeah, that's what I found. Okay.
Which
Yeah.
of course I would be surprised if Builder went anywhere. I mean, as in it's not going away because it's fundamental to Red Hat's container strategy with things like Podman and Builder being part of that story for Red Hat Enterprise Linux.
Yes, yes, yes.
So it wouldn't be, and then it's a fine thing to use in this circumstance because it'll just plug in and it's just a technology. It's not like you're bringing in anything that is specific to say UBI or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, 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 totally. Yeah, that would be would
Mm.
totally be a fine choice to replace
Mm.
Canico. Hmm,
Yeah.
interesting. Um,
Well, that fix didn't work. I shall try again.
Also in the Slack channel there was some activity with App Dynamics and native GraalVM image. It was
Mm.
mostly done with somebody named Anthony. Um, yeah, it wasn't me, but yeah, I think yeah, they were kind of course, encountering issues with a Windows environment, but yeah, I don't know how far they went with this, but yeah, that's kind of an interesting use case to actually have APM into native images. That's always kind of a challenge. And yeah, I think I mean, not only for Spring Native, but as well as Quarkus Native. They were,
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff just before Christmas looking at Quarkus Native before I got completely sidetracked into having to do all these updates because I
yeah,
was this close to having been ready to walk away from some of the stuff I was doing on this. And then my colleague pointed out, hey, it doesn't work on Mac. And it turned out that the reason it wasn't working on Mac was because, of course, he had an M1 Mac. And at this point, we have not published a multi-arch UBI builder image, but there are multi-arch runners. And so
yeah,
what was happening was that the builder was running in x86 emulation.
yeah,
And then when it went to pull the run image, it pulled the M1 run image,
yeah, yeah, the ARM64, yeah.
which then when the correct phase went to go and do it, the phase said, I can't find the run image that I'm supposed to be layering onto. And I'm like, well, I know I pulled it. So I had to update my platform to add code to figure out, well, hang on, if I'm pulling run images on behalf of an extension for a builder image, I should match the operating system of the pulled run image to that of the builder image that was executing.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's a safe assumption, right? And I don't think that's in the platform spec well enough yet. So I've got to have a word with Natalie if she's ever
Oh,
around again.
yeah, so Natalie is on parental leave.
She'll be out for a bit then.
Wait, because I knew the date. It started beginning of December. We're now end of January. I think she should be back in February or March.
That'll be perfect.
Yeah.
February will be really good. March would be less good. She's
Yeah.
really the only person who understands a lot of this at the moment now.
That's true. That's true. There used to be Juan,
Yeah.
but I don't know how active he is anymore.
I mean, I know my way around the Go code for all of the various phases because I've had to be involved with it for the extension stuff that we've done and a lot of the other fixes that I've worked with Natalie on. But yeah, with stuff like which is going on at the moment, having her to be able to turn around and say, "Yep, that's exactly what it's supposed to be doing, but this is the broken bit over there." I've already found to-dos in the code. It's like, we should probably find a better way to do this. And I'm looking at it thinking, yeah, but it's not the problem I've got. So let's just keep going.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
can happen.
we push that back up again. There we go. Yeah, so I don't know what's going on there. We shall see. I did a lot
Yes.
of stuff with Quarkus Native, as I said, just before Christmas, and I got that almost to the point where I was happy because I'd started looking into the correct versions of Mandrill to use, or Mandrill, or I forget. This is trying to recover things from my brain from before Christmas, which is not easy. Um,
What is it, Mandrill?
Mandrill, it's the Quarkus native compiler thingy. When you do the native builds of Java code,
Yeah, I use
there's
GraalVM
there's the,
native image.
there's the Oracle community supported thing, and then there's Mandrill, which is Quarkus's derived version of that cuts out a load of bits and pieces that aren't needed and improves on a bunch of stuff that wasn't quite what was expected.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I didn't know
so
you.
yeah, and
I don't know
then
what you said. It's not. Is it a wrapper around native image?
no, it's a complete rebuild.
Okay.
It's a nice piece of code, but
Nice. Okay.
the like Mandrill, I mean, I could be completely wrong here because, like, bear in mind, I'm going off of what I remember from early December, and I've done a lot of other stuff since then. But if I remember rightly, Mandrill was like the preferred compiler for building the Quarkus project into native because it's paired very well to each Quarkus release. But when I started writing the UBI Java stuff, there was no way to obtain this compiler because it was only available in an OCI image. Because that's how they recommended people build it. Because that way, you're essentially running containerized native builds, but without Buildpacks. So that was the solution to making sure that everybody had this compiler set up in the right way. And of course, if there's one thing that's very difficult to pull from when building Buildpacks, it's another OCI image because you can't easily drag content out of a different image and stick it into yours. Well, things have changed a bit. They now publish all of these releases on GitHub. And so I'd started just before Christmas looking into, well, could I update the Quarkus build pack to manage and supply the correct Java native, knowing that will run ahead of the Java build pack, so that then when that gets to it, it wouldn't do that. Because like on a UBI build, of course, the Java would be supplied by the extension. And I got myself in a complete knot and decided that in the end the extension could supply Mandrill or the community edition, so that essentially on a UBI build we'd end up building Quarkus projects using the preferred native compiler. But I just didn't get that one to anywhere near completion before a bigger problem came along that it just didn't work on Mac.
Yeah.
But if I can fix this problem that's going on today, then I'll be back on that again briefly.
Very
So
interesting. I
many
didn't
things to
know
do.
about Mandrill. Yeah, cool. Cool. Okay then.
All right. See you at the next one then, I guess.
Yes. With pleasure. Talk to you,
No
Ozzy.
worries. Have a good one. Take care. Yeah?
You too. Bye bye. Thanks. Bye.